Once we find Octavius and he fixes the violin, we are heading straight on.
Okay.
Greetings, musicians and animation viewers alike. This video is not the full film of Ernest and Celestine, A Trip to Gibberitia. This is a review of the English dub of the movie. At the time of release, A Trip to Gibberitia is available on DVD and Blu-ray from G-Kids, and can be digitally rented from online sites like Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and even YouTube itself. Please support the official release, because we want to keep encouraging animation from around the globe to be created. Sincerely, the Dub Talk Podcast.
Warning. The Dub Talk Podcast contains language and content that may not be suitable for younger audiences. Listener discretion is advised. There will also be spoilers for various anime throughout the course of this episode. Please use caution in case we discuss a series that you haven't finished. Finally, the opinions expressed are those of the individual participants and may not reflect the Dub Talk Podcast as a whole. Enjoy the show.
Fine. Okay, come on, let's get off.
Bonjour, madames et mademoiselles, and welcome to Summer at the Movies for Doug Talk. I'm sure you all have been enjoying the classy selections that our other members of the group have been putting together for you, going over some of the greatest and latest of Japanese movies, and even some classics thrown into the mix there. But we're going to take a little trip away from the land of the rising sun for this episode, because you lucky folks are going to be taking a little trip. And I'm not just talking about the title of the movie that you see there. No, I'm talking about a trip to an entirely different country, because more than just Japan makes really great animated movies that need to be dubbed into English for our ears. Yes, we are going to go over to France for this little excursion, and we're actually going to revisit an old friend, two friends that we've talked to before. But before I can do that, I want to introduce my good friend here. There is no one else who I would want to do this episode with, so I would like everyone to please put your paws together for Roots. Say hi, man.
Bienvenue!
How are you doing on this trip away from reality and to this mythical land of watercolors and talking animals?
Oh, hey, I mean, it's a nice little escape.
Yeah, because we don't really have any other movies like this in the lineup, I don't think. In fact, all the movies for Summer at the Movies are kind of, each one is different from the other one. So this is going to be the lighthearted, family-friendly entry, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
So, exactly, I forget. I've already forgotten, Roots. What series or duo of friends are we revisiting for this episode?
Well, Noah, I'm glad you asked. Several years ago, we got together and did an episode for a certain French animated film, sort of as a filler while we were working on Summer at the Movies. Little something called Ernest Celestine.
That's right. The Academy Award nominated movie about the bear and mouse who become good friends that came out a while ago. Well, why are we talking about it again? I mean, if we already covered the original movie, why would we be returning to these admittedly good friends?
Because they made a sequel, and we can.
I mean, yes, we can. We could do a ton of stuff. But yes, they did. Many of the producers decided 10 years after that original film came out, they wanted to make not necessarily a sequel, because they were pretty upfront about this isn't a continuation of the main story's plot, but it is another movie starring the main characters. Which is questionable. Because there is a little continuity here. It's not just the main characters, but they retouch on things that were kind of touched on in the first movie, whereas that first movie was more about Celestine's story, learning to be her own artist in her mouse community. This is much more of Ernest's story. We find out more about his backstory in this one.
Right.
With that said, I've got the Blu-ray from our good friends at G-Kids here. Shall I go ahead and read off the synopsis about what shenanigans Ernest and Celestine are getting into this time? All right. Well, our good friends Ernest and Celestine are returning in this delightful and joyous follow-up to their first adventure, where the bear and the mouse become the unlikeliest of friends. But in this movie, when Celestine accidentally breaks the beloved violin of Ernest, they embark on a journey to Ernest's homeland of Gibberitia. Yes, you heard that right. It's supposed to be like gibberish. It's supposed to be a country that is named after and is full of gibberish. So just keep that in mind. But when the duo arrives, they are shocked to discover that all forms of music have been banned for many years. That is not entirely true, actually, because in the movie, you can make music as long as it's one note. And what was that note again, Roots?
Do.
C note, or do. That is all you can play. And if you don't consider that music, well, I guess I can't blame you. But obviously, with Ernest and Celestine on the case, they are going to get into shenanigans with the help of a mysterious masked outlaw, and they're going to try to bring music and happiness back to the land of Gibberitia. That sounds like an interesting premise. I think this is well worth a revisit for Dub Talk. So thank you, Roots, for recommending this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how often do we get to talk about films that are not particularly from Japan, or media in that, for that matter?
Certainly less so nowadays. There used to be a lot of foreign media from not just Japan that had to be dubbed into English. Russia, like the entire Soviet Union, had a ton of media. Hungary, there's been a lot of different Spanish-speaking countries. And the country of France themselves are no stranger to that. But nowadays, with a lot of international productions going on, a lot of those movies do end up coming out of Japan. So for the sake of this discussion, I'm glad that not only did we get this movie, but we get it dubbed in English. We don't just have to listen to the French, which is beautiful, but it's also nice to have an English track to go with it.
Right.
Before we get talking about this main movie here, do you know anything about the TV series that came out after the main movie and before this new movie?
I know vaguely of it. Obviously, it's not available in the US, so I haven't been able to check it out. But I do know it exists.
And that's about the extent that most people know, is that the French producers made a smaller budget but similarly styled animated series that aired on French television back in 2017, and it aired for several episodes. Ironically enough, you say that it's not really available in America. It actually is available in America on one notorious streaming service. You're gonna be mad when you hear which one it is.
Uh-oh.
This notorious right-wing group called Daily Wire recently launched their own family-friendly streaming service called Bent Key. You may have heard of it.
Oh.
Yeah, big disappointment there. They were most notorious for producing a Bluey knockoff series called Chipchilla that got a lot of attention a couple of months ago. The reason I bring it up is because in order to pad out their library to compete with Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus, they imported a lot of foreign media just to have on their streaming service, which included the only official place, at least in the English-speaking world, to see the Ernest and Celestine series.
That's disappointing.
It is, and I'm very sorry that that's that fate. So aside, unless you want to pay for that, which I don't recommend, then yes, we really didn't get a whole lot of exposure to that series. So when I heard that they were making a new movie and that G-Kids was going to dub it and bring it over on Blu-ray, I was happy as a clam.
Same here, honestly.
So, that being said, we should probably go into who actually put together this dub, because it's been a while since the last one came out, but it's a lot of the same team on the dubbing side putting this together. That being said, it's a G-Kids adaptation of a French animated feature. Who could you guess? Who do you think might have been the director and scriptwriters for this production?
Oh, I have some hunches, but please, do, go on.
I mean, if any one of you out there were listening and you're like, is it Michael Sinner-Nicholas and Stephanie Shea? You are correct. You win the big prize. You win the violin. Because, yes, the same group, same duo who were responsible for bringing us the adaptation last time are here for this again. And I'm glad, too, because they did a bang-up job on the original film. A lot of good wordplay, but a lot of heart retained from the original. So this time they are brought back around to direct and scriptwrite this. Do I even need to list credits for what they've done before, or do their names kind of speak for themselves by this point?
At this point, I think we can safely say that you, the listener, are likely familiar with other works of NYAV Post and Michael Sinter-Nicholas and Stephanie Shea.
Right. And if you just need, like, a role that they've been in before, Stephanie Shea is probably best known as the redub voice of Sailor Moon from the Sailor Moon series. Michael Sinter-Nicholas is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. I feel safe in saying that's the most famous thing he's done. Actually, I'm sorry, I should say, because it popped on my radar recently because they re-released it in theaters in Japan, he was also the main kid from Summer Wars, the main math geek in that movie.
You could also say he was one of the lead actors in a particular 6-season Adult Swim action comedy series,
I mean, well,
lampooning on certain Hanna-Barbera classics.
I'm not sure if the general audience for this particular movie, though, are going to have been familiar with that.
This is fair.
I am curious about what the overlap is between, like, the general anime fan who, you know, you and I are in the circles of, and those who would have actually sought out this particular movie. Because this movie is definitely a family-friendly movie. There's nothing edgy or extreme in it, so I'm not sure the Adult Swim crowd is looking at Ernest and Celestine necessarily.
Well, you know, you never know.
You know what? We should be the bridge to make them check out new things, so we'll do that. This episode's going to be about convincing people to check out French cartoons about talking animals.
Watch foreign cartoons, you heathens.
So, then moving over to the dubcast. So, for this particular discussion, what we're going to do is, instead of having sections, we're just going to rattle off who's in the dub, and then we're going to have our discussions from there, so you all can enjoy listening to us bounce our thoughts off each other. Starting off with the main duo of Ernest and Celestine. So if you remember from our original episode a while back when we talked about who voiced Ernest and Celestine in that movie, Celestine was voiced by a young lady named Mackenzie Foy, and Ernest was none other than super awesome actor man Forrest Whitaker. Now, because of the time that has passed, and because I'm assuming just because of budget negotiations or so forth, they did not bring back the original actors for this English dub. Although, funny enough, on the French side they did. The original actors of Lambert Wilson and Pauline Brunner, who voiced the characters in the original film, were brought back for this one. So that's a difference between the French and the English. But who voiced them in the English this time? So Ernest is voiced by Andrew Kishino, and Celestine is voiced by Ashley Botcher. Now, Andrew Kishino is doing... Let's see, he's been doing voices for a good while. The first thing I knew him from is he voiced Kenny Kong, the football player in Spectacular Spider-Man. But he's also voiced a lot of stuff in more recent Western and American cartoon, Western and anime stuff. He's Kevin in Steven Universe, and I know him because he's Janja, the leader of the hyenas, in a show called The Lion Guard, which is basically the spin-off Lion King TV series that we never got in the 90s, but they finally made it in the 2010s.
And there's also a kind of an interesting fun fact attached to Andrew Kishino, in that he has acted as a voice double for Forrest Whitaker in the past.
Oh, he has?
His character in the Star Wars franchise, Saw Gerrera.
Yeah.
Andrew Kishino reprised him for stuff like Rebels, the animated side of the series.
Gotcha. See, I wasn't familiar with that character. Was Saw Gerrera he was the character that Forrest Whitaker played in what was that spinoff? Rebel 1?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't remember the name of that character. So that makes sense, though, then, that they would bring in someone who's been a voice double for Forrest Whitaker in another project without Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah.
Now, on the Celestine side of things, we have, like I said, Ashley Botcher, who is, funny enough, she was actually in the original Ernest and Celestine as a bit player. She was one of the orphan mouses in that one. So if you go back and listen, you might be able to pick up her voice in that. now she's graduated to being the new voice of Celestine. And this one I completely understand why, because the original voice, Mackenzie Foy, probably doesn't sound the same as she did when she was a kid back when they recorded the original. So for this one, we have another young voice to bring Celestine to life. Now, Ashley has been in quite a few things, which is surprising considering how young she is. Younger viewers of this podcast may remember her if you saw the movies Aliens in the Attic and Judy Moody and the Not Bummer Summer, which are movies that came out in a time where I wasn't watching those kind of movies. But she played characters like Jessica Finch and Hannah Pearson in those movies. As far as voice acting, though, she's been in quite a few things on both the West and the Japanese side. For instance, she plays the Hedgehog in Summer Camp Island. She played Gwen in 12 Forever. And she's even Dorothy Gale in the CGI series Lost in Oz, which is a series that I believe aired on Boomerang, and it was basically a televised adaptation of a lot more of the Oz books than we got from like the original Wizard of Oz movie, which is great because there's a lot of other great stories that were in that.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we've actually talked about with Ashley in it before that you guys remember from last year was she was in the movie Weathering with You. She was the lead girl of Hina Amano in that movie.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so no stranger to not only voiceover, but no stranger to this podcast. Now, switching over to some of the other bit players, whereas the last movie had a lot more side characters to discuss, this movie mostly has 3 side characters, and they're all relatives of Ernest. He has a dad named Nabokov, he has a mom named Camila, and he has a sister named Mila. So we're going to talk about those 3 because those are the main ones. So his dad is voiced by David Lodge. David Lodge has been voicing for quite a while. The first thing that viewers of this podcast may have heard him in is he was Puppetmon in Digimon Adventure. Other things have included in Naruto Shippuden, he plays the character of Jiraiya, and he's played the villain of Villamax and a lot of Power Rangers stuff. But the thing I want to point out, because it's kind of related to this franchise about talking bears, is if you've watched anything Care Bears related since 2012, you have heard David as Tenderheart Bear in every series or direct-to-video movie of Care Bears that has come out since then.
Aha!
Moving on over to the mom, Camilla, we have the lovely Anne Yatko. Now, I think we have actually talked about her before because she was actually in the redub, or rather I don't want to call it a redub, but she was in Flying Phantom Ship.
Yep, she was.
I believe that was the, which character was that? That was Mrs. Kuroshio in that movie.
Yeah, I think the, sort of surrogate mother figure, I think, if I recall correctly.
I don't think it was the biological mother. I think it was like the surrogate mom in that movie. I need to rewatch that again.
I know, it's been sitting on my shelf. I gotta get back to it.
But Anne has actually been voicing stuff, not since the 60s, but she has been doing bit parts in anime since at least the 2010s. Like, if you go back and watch stuff like Prince of Tennis, or Knights of Dissonia, or even the movie In This Corner of the World, you'll hear her in bit parts. More recently, you may have heard her in things like Mystia in Pompo the Cinephile, or Chio in Platinum End, or Lucian in the new Bastard series that aired on Netflix. And just to tie it back into one more French thing, Roots, have you ever heard of a show called Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir?
I don't think it rings a bell. No, it does. It does.
Really? Oh. I legitimately was not sure, because you and I have never talked about it on camera, microphone, before. Well, the reason I bring that up is because Anne is the character of Sabine Chang, which I believe is the lead character's mom in that series. So that, again, ties back into another French production, because, dear God, is Miraculous Ladybug very, very French.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could do an episode on that some other day. Maybe not the whole series, but at least like one of the movies or something.
Maybe someday.
And rounding out the cast, we have the sister of Mila. We have Ernest's little sister. who actually gets a dual role because she's not only the sister, but she's also a freedom-fighting, mask-wearing saxophone player named Mi La Sol, which, yes, is named after the different notes. And that is brought to us by the wonderfully talented Lina Josephine Morano. Now, that is a voice that I have not heard before, but that's only because I haven't seen Suzume. Have you seen Suzume, Roots?
I have not actually seen it dubbed. Fun little story. I actually bought the big, 4K UHD set for it. It doesn't come with the dub, but I have at least seen the movie.
How does it not come with the dub?
It came from Japan. What can I say?
You know what? Shout Factory sometimes will do returns on faulty discs or something. You should send it back to Japan and say, this is faulty. Please include the English audio. Yes, I know you didn't produce it, but I need it on this UHD high definition disc.
I'll see how that goes.
Well, the reason I bring up Suzume is because Lina is actually a voice in that. She's a character of Daijin. I don't know who that is because, like I said, I haven't seen the movie yet. But I have to presume that it is important enough to bring up. But yeah, for being a younger actress, Lina's done quite a bit. She's she plays one-offs in different series. You can hear her as Fiona in Young Jedi Adventures, which is basically if you took the Star Wars franchise and crossed it with PJ Masks.
Just don't think about what happens a couple hundred years later. Just don't.
And then to give one more notice to what else Lina has done before, on top of being voice acting proficient, she's actually been in theater roles before, which is pretty common, I find, with a lot of these NYAV discussions, is that the actors they bring on, if they're not super well known in the voice acting sphere, they've at least had quite a bit of theatrical work before, which shows that they like acting and they're experienced in that. So just to list some highlights, Lina, she played Cindy Lou Who in a recent performance of The Grinch, the stage version, the rather doomed stage version, which I only know about because another YouTuber named Obscurus Lupa did a countdown of the top 8 Grinches in media, and one of them was the stage version, and it looks like a very cursed theatrical production.
I'm gonna have to look into that, because I happen to quite enjoy cursed theatrical productions.
It's a Dr. Seuss adaptation on stage. You know about Seussical, right?
Yep.
Yeah, think that, but with the Grinch.
I see.
Yes, so that's what Lina's done before. She's done that. She's been young Anna in a stage production of Frozen. She's been around for quite a while, and I'm glad to have her in this dubcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, Roots, let me give you the microphone. Let me give you the violin. Let me give you the Stradivarius, not Stradivarius, the Stradivarius, and let me know, what'd you think of this movie?
So, a reason I wanted to do this episode in the first place is just how dramatically different the cast is between the original film, which was, incredibly star-studded and intended to, grab Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to this one, which, it seems like what they were aiming for was just a relatively successful theatrical run.
And in that case, you're not necessarily going to get the star. You're not going to get William H. Macy or Forrest Whitaker in the cast this time.
Right. However, it is an interesting contrast because NYAV Post is really good with the star-studded casts, making sure that it doesn't feel like they don't get people who don't know their way around an ADR booth.
They don't do the DreamWorks thing where they just put names in the cast even if they're not necessarily they can't do voice acting.
Right. And even when somebody isn't particularly tested yet, they tend to put out some really good results. There's a particular film that I would love to cover sometime this year that managed to walk away with an Academy Award.
Oh,
Wink,
yeah,
wink.
Yes.
Anyway, in terms of in terms of the acting quality between the original Ernest and Celestine and A Trip to Gibberitia, I don't see any sort of significant difference. You can tell the actors are not the same, but at the same time, you can put that suspension of disbelief into play, and it's good stuff.
The acting is more noticeable, I feel, on Celestine because Ernest is lower voice and gruffness, does not have long sentences, and because Andrew is definitely trying to imitate the original's voice, he's got I think he's got a good handle on it. It's if you told me that this was the same actor, it would take me longer than I'd be proud to admit to realize that, oh wait, this is not our beloved Forrest Whitaker.
Right. But I think as you had mentioned at the beginning of the film, this film is meant to stand alone compared to the original Ernest and Celestine, presumably also the TV series.
Yes.
And in that sense, the dub cast can also stand on its own very well. This is not only an attribution to the Michael Sinterniklaas's direction and Stephanie Shea's script writing. It is also a pretty decent testament to the actors that were brought in to play the characters.
They're given a lot of range to work with. The story goes from starting out in a comfortable setting with Ernest and Celestine just kind of living in their own home to, oh no, this violin has been broken. It's a very special one. And it was in this beginning scenes where Andrew has to convey the sorrow of seeing his beloved violin broken and realizing that, no one can fix this. You can't just go and buy this. He put in some good dramatic reads in there, especially while maintaining the gruff bear voice. It never dropped in that scene.
Right.
I do think that I did not notice any noticeable changes between the subtitles, because I was watching the dub with the subtitles, and what was being spoken. And I jumped between the dub and the sub occasionally just to kind of get an ear for what the sub sounded like. It sounds very faithful. I don't think anything was really lost in adaptation between bringing it from French to English. Do you?
Not particularly. Personally, and I would be very curious to pick the brains of those who do the translation and adaptation work to do basic script writing. But to me, it feels like French might be an easier language to switch back and forth between in terms of dubbing. Mainly because linguistically, English and French have similar, if not, similar linguistic roots.
Yeah, in watching with just the French track, you can pick out certain words that are I'm not fluent in this, obviously, but I can pick up certain words here and there. And yeah, the way that they speak it's obviously Latin-based, so yeah, I would have been incredibly surprised if they had botched the adaptation, honestly.
And going into the characters, I'm going to start with Ernest's family.
Yes, let's do that. Let's talk about the judge, the doctor, and the revolutionary.
I really like Yako's Camellia, especially in the scene where she's introduced, where she's a doctor. Ernest is in jail. She goes to do the initial examination, and it's just oh yeah, I know this dental pattern anywhere. It's my son.
And she does the traditional mom thing of, you couldn't have called, you couldn't have written a letter, all this years, and you didn't even contact us. But I'm still so happy to see you, and I brought your favorite tea.
Just happened to have the tea with her.
So in listening to Camilla's French performance, it actually sounds pretty similar to what Anne pulled off. The meaning the delivery, the flow, the way that she delivers her lines. I'm not sure if Anne was intentionally trying to mimic it, but it does have the very same cadence to it. In fact, and you correct me if you didn't hear this yourself, but I feel like Anne was trying to put on something of a drawl, like almost a Midwestern drawl in her delivery, which made the voice of her sound more colorful than, like, say, any of the mom characters we heard in the original or any of the other non-named female bears that we see in this movie.
I don't know if that was what I picked out, but there definitely was something to it.
Would you say did it sound very natural?
You know, you could say that.
It was definitely a delivery that matched up with the facial expressions, and it went with the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of a mom's emotions between being happy her son is here, upset that he's in jail to begin with, saying, you should go talk to your dad, but, I still love you, even if the two of us aren't together, which... What kind of a couple cuts the house in half when mom and dad splits up? Like, that is just not a thing I don't think it ever was a thing.
Well, I mean, it's efficient.
Is it? Is it efficient? Would it be just more efficient to move into a separate house? Do you know how hard it is to cut a house in half?
I mean...
You've got the piping, you've got the wiring, you've got the insulation, you basically you've undone everything that made the house a house.
Yeah. But then also, it's a cartoon. Don't think about it too much.
I can't help it. I get that was the theme of the movie, though, was a society that is so entrenched with their ancient rules that they do not feel like they can ever break away from them, and can't even see the absurdity of what's happening when you don't allow people to live life normally.
As they want to.
Yes, which we'll get to when we talk about the very ending of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. I liked Anne's delivery a lot, and I really should check out some of the other stuff that she's done, including I haven't seen the new Bastard series. I liked the original OVA that came out back in the 80s, so I need to check out this new one that's on Netflix.
Yeah, at some point I intend to get to it as well. Just one of those things that I haven't had time to actually sit down for.
Show of hands, everyone in the audience. Who else has a massive to-watch pile that is just getting longer and longer every day?
Yep.
All right, which of the family members do you want to talk about next?
David Loach's Nabokov. I like how he was able to kind of play off of Ernest's energy.
It's obviously a strained relationship.
Oh, yeah. But he's able to just... He's able to play off of Andrew Kishino really well. The dynamic of Ernest and Nabokov basically creates the emotional core of the film. If either of them weren't able to pull off the relationship of father and son, the whole film would have fallen apart.
Yeah, and this is that continuity with the first movie that I mentioned before, because in the first movie, Ernest mentions that his dad wanted him to be a judge, because that's what every man in their family had done. And of course, Ernest didn't want to do that. He wanted to, be an entertainer, wanted to be a musician, which is why they have a strained relationship in this movie. And that's like the thing of the entire Gibberitian society is we're not supposed to do a job different than the one that our parents did. Like,
right.
I mean, that seems really limiting because, like, maybe you need more people doing jobs than you had people doing it originally. What if they don't have children? What if there's just no need for that job anymore? Like, do we need this many judges? That seems to be something that you really only need one or two of in society.
What if you have a particular niche skill and have, 10 kids?
That's a good point. There's so many things go wrong with this. I'm not sure if this was written with the express purpose of being commentative about anything in the real world. This feels like something that could be speaking to a young listener who feels like they're pressured to do whatever their parents or family did rather than what they want to do, and letting them know, no, it's okay for you to seek out your passions and make that your future. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a carpenter. You don't have to be a basketball player. You can do whatever you want. It's a free world.
Right.
Yeah, I agree that David's back and forth off of Ernest is good in the scenes where they do have to interact, particularly because David has a tough job. He's got to have a low, older voice compared to Andrew, and Andrew's already got a lower voice like this. Is supposed to be, bear-like, whereas David is supposed to be the same character, older than that character. I'm not sure if it's quite as believable because, I'm sorry, I don't know how old David is in real life, but it does sound a bit like someone who's trying to sound older than they actually are.
Yeah.
But he does get a chance to have a lot more emotion than just the angry, disapproving dad, because we find out that he's actually really upset when his kids are in trouble and he can't help them because he feels a slavish dedication to his judging job. The thing that stood out to me was the scene where we find out who the real person behind the mask of Mila Sol is, and he goes from being the stringent, by the rules kind of person, and David has to all of a sudden get very emotional and breath in the voice, and why did it have to be this way? It almost reminded me of the uncle in Into the Spider-Verse, Uncle Aaron, when he finds out that, oh shoot, Spider-Man's my nephew, I can't kill him.
Yeah.
Was there any other standout scenes with Nabokov that you wanted to mention?
I mean, not in particular, because Nabokov's appearances were fairly straightforward and simple, so not really much to say other than basically his introduction, sort of some of the core arguments, and the final scene where he and Ernest are finally able to reconcile. And you learn that he is the one who actually repaired Ernest Stradivarius.
Mm-hmm.
Which it should be noted that the reason Ernest's violin is so special is because it is a Stradivarius. It is considered to be one of the finest crafted instruments in the world, and they're all 500 years old, and the skills to create a Stradivarius were never passed down. What we have in the world is what we've got.
Yeah, and there's been studies on that. There's been attempts to try to not only recreate it, but also determine in modern day, okay, do these Italian violins actually make music that sounds more beautiful than any modern instruments? And there've been blind listening from violin experts, and not really. There's not really a special tone they make that can't be duplicated on other violins, but they are held in very high pristine. There's the wood comes from a special forest, and they're made with very unique qualifications that can't be passed on, weren't passed on, and we can't duplicate them nowadays. It's kind of wild that anyone would pay thousands of dollars for an instrument, but
hundreds.
That's the collector
of
market for you. Is it that much even?
Oh yeah.
Dang, I'm gonna Google this right now. How much does a Stradivarius violin cost? Oh, we're both wrong. $20 million.
Oh, wow, that's very north.
Don't try to tell me, any one of you out there, that that's not overpriced, even for a mythical sounding instrument.
Teach their own, I suppose.
And Celestine messed it up! She broke it!
Well, thankfully in the universe of Ernest and Celestine, there's somebody who can repair it.
Yeah, this Octavius fellow who, unfortunately, doesn't get a whole lot of lines, so that's why we didn't mention him in the cast sections, but yeah, that's not something that would happen in the real world. You can't just break the neck from the body of the violin and it's like, oh, just glue it back together. All set.
Yeah.
Speaking of that resistance, resistance against the rule that there can only be one note in the city, we should probably talk about Mila and her performance.
Oh yeah. I like how there are that her actor was able to do the two facets of the character quite well. You do have like Ernest's little sister Mila, kind of the sweet, bubbly kind of character, and then you have Mila So, the sort of French-esque revolutionary who's trying to restore music in Gibberitia.
Vive la France. I honestly, before we were revealed who Mila Soul really was, I thought it was a young male actor playing the role. And I think that Lena was probably directed to try to put on the affectation of a young boy. Because, sometimes female actresses get cast to play young boys because, well, you can't cast an older male voice for that.
Right.
I think that's how she was able to convey both halves of it without the two of them sounding identical to each other.
I could see that.
And what I wanted to really compliment is that when I'm listening to a dub in any language, I get distracted when different characters sound too similar to each other. But I'm happy to say in this one that Mila did not sound the same as Celestine.
Yeah, that would have been a deal breaker right there.
Yeah, Celestine's performance in this is a much lighter, very, very still peppy, but yeah, light sounding voice. Whereas Mila gets to have, she's supposed to be, I think, a little older. And, she said she wants to be a judge, so she's got to be somewhere in the, I don't know what, actually, I'm not sure what age it's supposed to be exactly, but the delivery was certainly one that had a lot more texture and a little more age to it, which, again, made it sound unique in this cast.
That it did.
So yeah, no qualms really with any of Ernest's family in this. They fit their roles for what they were supposed to do. Comparing them to the French side, it was a perfectly good adaptation. Like, if you're someone who's like, should I watch this in the original French or should I watch this in English? I think you could get the same experience out of both of them. They're going to suit you just fine, no matter which one you go to.
Yeah.
So with that, do we want to, compare the Ernest and Celestine that we got in this movie to the performances from the original movie?
Voice-wise, they were very, very similar. Performance-wise, with Gibberitia, the new actors fit pretty well, honestly. I have no complaints. Ernest, as you said, tends to speak in sort of shorter, growly sentences. I could imagine that might be something a lot of actors would struggle with. You have to convey a lot of emotion in just a couple words.
And it's hard to do that without accidentally becoming monotone. Because
yes,
a lot of, I speak for myself. When I'm trying to speak, I have to have a couple of sentences before I get into my rhythm and have more of a personality and style in there. If I'm just restricted to 3 or 5 words at a time, I'm gonna fall into the trap of not breaking out of that tone and have it sound a little too monotone. But I don't think that Andrew had that problem. I think it's because the movie gives him opportunities to not just be gruff all the time. He has to be hungry in the beginning of the movie. He's got to be exasperated when he realizes that Celestine ran off to go repair his violin. There's a really heartwarming scene right after he gets out of jail where him and Celestine are sitting on the banks and they're talking about families and how, he's not really close to his family. And Celestine responds, "But you are my family, so your family is my family." And his response is basically, you may not want to feel that way when you meet the rest, when you really get to know them. But that was a good delivery on Andrew's part in conveying the emotion of, I'm happy that my friend is here to support me and considers us family, and also, she doesn't know what she's getting into.
Yeah.
And then Ashley, has the luxury of, in this movie, there being more exciting scenes and a lot less sad ones than the original did, because the original film was all about Celestine having to deal with being an outsider, not being able to collect enough teeth, and eventually being a fugitive from the law. Whereas in this one, Celestine she's sad that she broke the violin, but she gets to go on an adventure. She gets to, travel through the mountains, and she gets to be part of this freedom-fighting revolution to try to bring music back to a land that has forgotten its music. So I think that Ashley, in that sense, gets to have a lot of fun in this one. And yeah, it ranges all over the place. Her delivery of both sorrow that she broke the violin, the headstrongness of, hello, Ernest. I just want to let you know that I've gone off to go fix your violin. And yeah, the range of emotions in there actually sounded like she was having a lot of fun. And I'm glad that they decided to cast another young actress to retain the pitch, the cadence that Celestine had in the original.
Yeah, and honestly, I think one of the big advantages Ashley had in this film is Celestine, and this is going to sound strange because she was basically the main player of the original film, but Celestine just gets more to do in Gibberitia than the original.
Yeah, that is interesting, because you would think that her being the main player of the original, she'd have more to do in that one. But I think there's just more going on in this film. It is an actual adventure. If I had to pick one line of that sounded like Ashley was having the most fun of Celestine's, it's in the scene where they've been let into the secret nightclub where people are playing music, and Ernest is brought up on stage and he starts playing, and Celestine is staying on the table. It's like, "Woo, you go, Ernest!" And it's this very bubbly and supportive sound that is wow, that is what voice acting is about right there.
And I think for me, it is when she's in the prison with Mila, and Mila is basically tricking the guards into the idea that they had falsely imprisoned her instead of Mila Sol. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Celestine's going around cell to cell and letting everybody out. I thought that was great. And when they sneak into, Nabokov's side of the family house and discovers Stradivarius is fixed. And also looking out and seeing that's her mom's house right outside the door, which means we must be in Dad's house, which means he's been rescuing the instruments all this time. Yep. I
do love the way that that Mila, when she gets reunited with her saxophone, she's like, "I come to be my sweet summer child," or something. I should have written the note down. But the absolute joy of someone who is so attached to their instrument that they are so enraptured when they get it back again.
Yep.
Yeah, this movie definitely made a case for the power of music, for the reason why we need it in our lives. I'm trying to think if there's any shortcomings of not just the dub but the movie as a whole. The only shortcoming I guess I'd point out, since we got the time for it, is that this was obviously directed and produced by folks who had been working in television for a while, and looking into who the French directors were, I found out that's true. Both the directors Julien Chang and Jean-Christophe Rogers had worked on the television series before, and a couple of other animated films and movies over in Europe. In fact, Julien, he's actually won an Emmy before for, of all things, his work on Primal, the Genndy Tartakovsky Adult Swim series.
Huh.
Yeah.
Go figure.
I mean, it's fun to watch the international animation community, give opportunities to people from all over the world. For instance, I don't know if you saw it, but the most recent Illumination movie that came out was this duck movie called Migration. Did you see that? Or at least hear about it?
I haven't seen it, but I know it is from the director of the original film.
Yeah, it was directed by Benjamin Renner, who was a co-director on the original film. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, well, I'm going to be watching this movie. Ended up seeing it, and it was, I don't think it's comparable to Ernest and Celestine necessarily. It's a very different kind of movie. It's wacky, slappy, illumination fun. But I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. And I'm glad that it didn't do gangbusters necessarily, but it also found a small but loyal audience when it came out.
So in my opinion, one of the big shortcomings of Trip to Gibberitia is it doesn't quite have the same emotional punch as the original. And it does feel like a 90-minute episode of a TV show.
It's certainly paced and written that way, where conflict is introduced and everything's resolved in the end. But you're right, it doesn't necessarily have much of an emotional gut punch like the first one did. Mostly because even though it does also involve becoming fugitives of the law like the first one, that first one resulted in like being ostracized from the only family the only home that Celestine had ever known. Whereas in this one, it's just like, we are temporarily inconvenienced by being in a jail cell in a town that we're not really familiar with, and we as the audience know that, well, we're obviously going to get them out by the end of the movie.
But I will say the idea of Ernest having to push Celestine away basically as a means to restore music to this town, like, that did resonate a bit, but it didn't quite have the same resonance as, Celestine getting ostracized from her community in the original.
Yeah, and I think the reason why that beat in this movie didn't quite strike as strong is because we hadn't really set up until this point that that's a sacrifice that would have needed to be made, and we as the audience also know this is a temporary thing. It's not like they're going to stay separated forever. It's
right.
I'm trying to think of if I could compare it to another talking animal thing, is Spice and Wolf, the original series, has a scene where the two main characters are possibly going to be separated because a character offers to buy Holo off of Lawrence, basically, and you're like, oh, that's not going to happen. But then they actually throw in a curveball that makes you think, oh, they may actually be separated because they've had this emotional breakdown of their trust. We needed something like that in this movie, some sort of friction between the two main characters that would make us think, maybe Ernest will stay in this town. Maybe he will forego his musical roots and become a judge like his dad wanted, and maybe Celestine has lost her best friend. So yeah, we don't quite get that in this movie.
Yeah.
Incidentally, for anyone asking, no, I have not started watching the new Spice and Wolf series yet. I will be once the whole season is out because I don't want to wait for the next episode.
It's all right.
This is very telling that we're talking about not a remake, but a continuation of a franchise in a decade where I feel like we've been getting nothing but continuations or remakes or just more of franchises that we had thought would never come back again.
Sequels, reboots, spin-offs, you name it.
By the way, we are recording this on the day that it was just announced that there is going to be a new Magic Knight Ray-Earth series. And you can bet we are hyped for that. I'm hyped for that. I'm sorry, I don't know if you've seen the original.
I have. We'll see how the remake goes.
I'm just happy that people are going to be hopefully watching the original again. So with that being said, I feel like we've covered our whole grand story for Ernest and Celestine. Of course, it has a happy ending in the end. It comes to, like the original film, it comes down to a courtroom scene where it basically is decided, you know what? This is a stupid rule, making kids do what their parents did. We're going to let kids do whatever they want. We're going to let music exist once again. And that's the bare dream right there.
Yeah, ends in a courtroom with surprisingly less fire.
Thank goodness, too. So let that be a lesson, kids. If you do not like the way that judges decide laws should be followed in your country, not saying any country in particular, all you need to do is become a revolutionary with a mask and a saxophone, and you too can change the fate of the world.
I mean, it beats redacted.
This is why neither of us are running for political offices. But that's
Yeah.
all right, because that means that we get to spend more time talking about these great animated features. And with that, I believe we have talked about all of the highs and lows of this new feature from the world of Ernest and Celestine. And so you've been probably listening to this for an hour and wondering, where can I get my paws on this movie? Is it streaming anywhere? And no, not yet. Well, that's not entirely true. You can buy it on any of those rent it for a couple of days or buy a digital copy of it sites, like, you know, your Amazons, your Fango Dangos, or your any other sites like that. But I think what the both of us would recommend is that you look up the Blu-ray release. Yes, there is an R1 Blu-ray release of Ernest and Celestine, A Trip to Gibberitia. And you can get it from G-Kids. It is a nice bilingual release. It looks great. It's got some nice behind-the-scenes interviews and questions with both the creators and kind of a making-of video. The only thing I'll criticize on this is that, and I've just noticed this recently with G-Kids, is that their main menu screens all look the same. Come on, G-Kids, you can mix up a little bit. You don't have to just have the bottom screen has the menu options while a video plays in the background. I don't know if you missed the days of, like, when there were Easter eggs on the DVD menu, but I miss those so much.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see why they've gone by the wayside, but yeah, I can see it.
Well, anyway, aside from that little nitpick, yeah, it's a pretty good release. So if you want, check it out. It is available on every place where major Blu-rays are sold.
In terms of streaming, I would probably say it will inevitably come to a service of some kind. I would probably keep an eye out for, like, Hulu and Canopy, because that's where G-Kids stuff typically goes.
That's a good point. I haven't been taking as much advantage of my of Canopy since I found out that you could use a library card to get that. I really should take more advantage of that.
Yeah, same here.
Now, if you would like to follow what we do around here, because you're like, I have no idea where to follow this Dub Talk podcast thing, well, obviously, you are listening to us on either our YouTube channel, which we would appreciate any additional subscriptions to that, comments below. I gotta do the whole thing like I'm on the radio, where it says, you know, do what you can to engage with the algorithm.
Okay.
Or you could also listen to us on any of our audio-only feeds. We've got Podbean, we've got Spotify, we've got Apple Play, we've got, you know, basically every place where an audio-only podcast can be found.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would like to be just a little more special, because I know you want to be special, you can even check out our Patreon, where we have exclusive perks for people, including getting previews of the episodes early and the ability to vote on what episodes we will cover next. So we want to give a huge shout out to all of our wonderful patrons who continue to make our lives possible. Starting off with our $5 patrons. Big thanks to Megan's mom and dad. Huge thanks to Michelle Travis. And big thanks to Marissa Lenti. But we can't just stop there. We need to give an even bigger shout out to our $10 patrons, the people who contribute just a little bit more and get the episodes a little bit earlier. We thank you very much. Those individuals are the awesome Anthony Brown, the charismatic Carly Lesticow, the quite wonderful Crimson Echidna, the joyous Julia W., the cannot believe that they are this cool Quinoa Soup, and the awe-inspiring Otaku Anthony. Thank you guys very much. We really do appreciate the continued support.
Thank you for the money.
Speaking of money, Roots, what are you doing when you are not working for money? What do you do in the fun world, and where can the folks find you out there?
So, hello there. My name is Patrick, aka Roots of Justice. You can find me on the former Twitter, at Roots of Justice, mainly talk general fandom, cute animal pics. You should drop by. Have a nice time. Also, kind of finding my way over to Blue Sky and updating a blog periodically.
And what are you hoping to cover on this infrequent blog of yours?
Just whatever free flow of consciousness hits my desire to write at the time.
All right. So check that out if you want to get to the root of what Roots is thinking about today.
And every time I show up on this podcast, I provide you with a cool thing of the day. So this is today's Patrick's cool thing of the day.
Ooh.
And I'm going to keep this one simple because I haven't had a lot of time to really spread my roots out and try new things as of late. But one thing I would recommend is the new animated Ultraman movie on Netflix, Ultraman Rising. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely adorable. And if you like those animated films where the villain is shared generational trauma, hello.
Oh, absolutely. I loved Encanto.
But it's a fun little adventure, like, Aries gonna grow on ya. Like, check it out. It's on Netflix.
I wasn't even aware they were doing an animated Ultraman. I thought he was gonna stay in live action forever.
Yeah, they, Industrial Light and Magic produced the film.
Oh, well then, shoot. Then I am putting that on the list then.
It is one of those animated films where they really kind of bend the traditional stylistic expectations, and like, it looks great, and it's a fun movie.
That is Ultraman Rising on Netflix now.
Correct.
And you can follow me on Twitter at NoahClue. I still call it Twitter. I'm not going to call it the former Twitter because no one I know, and I don't think even like the Supreme Court is going to call it anything other than Twitter. So we're just going to keep calling it that.
Everybody still calls it Twitter. That's the fun of it.
Yeah. So former Twitter, my ass. It's always going to be Twitter as long as it continues to exist. But you can follow me on Twitter at NoahClue, where I also just post a stream of consciousness, mostly discussions about the wide world of animation for both Japan and France and all over the world, as well as cute pictures of my own kids and pets, because when you are a family man, you get to post your trips to Cedar Point, which is the most recent trip that we went on. I don't quite have a cool thing of the day like Patrick has, but I do want to plug at least one last movie before we finish off here that this movie reminded me of. So this is a movie about a society that's kind of stuck in its laws, is so stuck in following the rules that they end up ostracizing people who don't fit into that. And another animated movie that this reminds me of is The Point. The Point is this bizarre early 80s adaptation of a Harry Nilsson album. Yes, he created all the songs for this, and it is basically about a society where everyone has a point on their head, meaning they have a point. But it focuses on one kid who is born with a round head, and because the law says everyone must have a point, he is kicked out of the village, and he goes on an animated adventure to find a point. That is The Point. I'm sure you can find it anywhere because it's not like anyone has a copyright on that anymore. Again, it reminded me a lot of this movie in terms of breaking the society's grip on rules and realizing, hey, maybe sticking to laws that don't do anything for anyone is not cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've covered our trip. I think it's time. We got to get back into the gondolas or whatever those things are on the ropes that go through the village, and we got to get back to our regular society. So come along, Patrick. Let's get back in and wave goodbye to the fine folks.
All right, just don't call any attention to customs. I have like 40 pounds of cheese in my bag.
Dude, you got 40 pounds of cheese. I've got 3 cellos here. Like, we'll be lucky if we can get through unscathed.
Oh, they're not gonna care about that.
It's all about the cheese.
Go figure.
All right. Well, aloha and otaku on, my friends.
Otaku on there, Deba.